Welcome to this session of our conference with the Stauffer family. I'm Reed Ernstrom. I serve on the board of directors at Paz Wellness. This is my family. My daughter Emily, her husband Eric, and my granddaughter Lydia. I'm going to make this brief because their presentation is so wonderful and so powerful. Eric has a master's degree from Utah State, both his bachelor's and master's. And Emily attended Utah State. She works in estate planning with legal wills and trusts. And Lydia is a junior at Ridgeland High School. And it's my pleasure to introduce them and turn the time over to them because you'll be amazed at this incredible story. Eric?
Thank you. So we were invited to do this panel because we presented last year, well, I presented last year at the Faith Summit, and we had a lot of feedback and requests that they wanted to have some question and answer, to be able to get more of the family dynamic of what it's like to have a teen go through serious mental health issues, parents, the child, and so that's really what we're going to try to accomplish today. But we're assuming that many of you were not at that presentation last year, and so we want you to know the story so you have the context of what we've learned and what we've been through so that it'll help you. The title of the presentation last year was Navigating Perfectionism and Scrupulosity in a Culture of Orthodoxy. And I made this joke last hour and it really worked, but I got a lot of flack for that title. So, this is our family. So Lydia, who you see here, is on the far end of the picture. Then me, this is our new son-in-law, Nate Rock, and our daughter Jenny. They just got married in April, and they knew each other in the mission field. My daughter served in the Richmond, Virginia mission, and Nate was there. He was her last zone leader. They actually came home on the same plane, and within a week he asked her out, and now they're married. And that's my wife, Emily. We've been married 23 years. And our son, Paul, who's serving a mission in Kansas, and our son, Sam, who is in 8th grade here at Spring Creek. This picture, I would say, is a very Mormon picture, right? So, and that reminds me of a disclaimer I really want to make about this. So, at Paz Wellness, we really want to be as non-denominational as possible. However, our story is very denominational. Our background is Latter-day Saint, and so I hope you'll pardon us as we share about that specific experience. And it's going to have some of those implications because we're going to talk about the culture of Latter-day Saints and its impact on what we've been through. But yes, this is a very Mormon picture, right? You got the cutout of the son on a mission. You got the Temple Day wedding picture. But remember, pictures are not everything. It's perception versus reality. And what you don't see in this picture is incredible hardship and difficulty through some very serious circumstances that we've had to face. So this is Lydia, and thankfully, Lydia has been willing to be open about her story, which is very key, because normally this stuff is very private and very embarrassing to a teen, and they don't want people to know about it, and so these stories stay private. But because she's been willing to share with the intention of helping people, she's allowed us to share it, and so we're so thankful for that. About 3 years ago, Lydia started to experience, to show really serious signs of anxiety and depression. And it was pretty scary stuff. And she started having panic attacks over ballet and school and friends and things like that. And then as she started to open up more after a few months, she was open with us about her suicidal ideation. And immediately, obviously, you have red flags go up and you panic. You don't know what to say as a parent because you're afraid that if you talk about it, you're going to present ideas that will lead to further suicidal ideation. When in reality, the best guide is the counterintuitive to that, which is you need to talk about it. You need to have a conversation, because if they retreat and they try to do this on their own, that's an environment that's more dangerous to them. So we started doing our research. Thankfully, she was willing to go to therapy, and we found this incredible therapist who we love dearly, who is presenting right now, and he's in the back room, is Jason Dalton, but he helped us. It's impossible to state how much he has helped us. And it's the science. It's his understanding of the science of the brain, and so many of those principles that helped Lydia. I think it was crucial that we did this together as a family, that we weren't just sending our kid to, thankfully she was willing to let us do this as a family, Lydia was. But if we are not learning alongside of her, then we're not changing her environment. And if we're not changing her environment, we're just feeding her the same thing over and over and over. And so that was a little bit, that we were fortunate for that. Well, it got really bad. So even though we had her in therapy and we had her on medication and she was trying to do these things, it got really bad, and she started being very suicidal. And she was going to try and starve herself to death. She really started self-harming a lot. And then she had plans of how she was going to do it. She was going to wait. We were sleeping by her every night to keep her safe. And she was going to wait until we were asleep, and then she was going to take her life. When it was at that point, and we knew that we couldn't control whether or not we fell asleep because we got so tired, that we had to do something. So we had some great connections and some great guides to help us to know what to do. But it really boiled down to whether or not Lydia was willing to go, because forcing only makes the problem worse. And one night she was willing to accept that she needed to go to the emergency room. And so we go to the emergency room. They did an evaluation, an incredible crisis worker there, Kate Packer, just love her dearly. Both times we went in, actually, both ER visits, Kate was the crisis worker there. And in both circumstances, it was determined that she needed to go into an inpatient care facility. The first time going down to Primary Children's and dropping her off was one of the hardest days of our life. It's just a scary experience. You're dropping your child off, you don't know what they're going to receive. And it's honestly, now in hindsight, it's the best thing that parents can experience is a little bit of letting go, a little bit of handing it over. She got pretty good after that first day, and things went really well, and she was really up and down. It was a very roller coaster experience, and so heavy. It was so heavy in the home. And after 6 more months or so, it was just like 3 months, 4 months, it got really, really bad. And one day I knew that she was in a bad place. I was with her, and she kicked me out of her room. And so I just knew she was not safe, and I knew I needed to be nearby. So I was outside of her room, and I was just listening in, and I could tell that she was going to do something. And sure enough, she was going to hang herself. And so I felt guided to know when to go in, and I went in and I interrupted this, and we knew that she had to go back in. That second one was not good. It was really heavy. And she was in a very angry, and she was in we were her worst enemy. Honestly, she was our worst enemy. It was really bad. And going into that second stay at McKay this time, she was angry. She didn't want help. It was really bad. She was finally able to get home, and there was just some breaking points that we'll try to identify. But that's been our story and our experience with Lydia. As we started doing our work and learning about what it was, one of the key things, and I said this last year, so I apologize if it's a repeat for you, but one of the key moments when we were going to therapy is when her therapist looked at me and said, Eric, do you realize what a shadow you cast? I'm a religious educator, that's my profession. I was serving as a bishop at the time, and she was a child in that atmosphere, and he was saying, you cast this shadow that she doesn't feel like she will ever be seen as herself. She's always just going to be seen as Eric's daughter, or Bishop Stauffer's daughter. And then he said, do you realize that she's willing to kill herself to teach you a lesson? And I had to stare that truth in the face. And I had to realize, okay, if I don't change something about this, even though I thought I was doing my very best, and I thought we were very loving, open, liberal-minded as much as we could be parents, and we thought that we were creating the safest environment we could, and still it wasn't enough. And so we started looking into this. Her diagnosis was major depressive disorder, acute anxiety, perfectionism, and scrupulosity. So we had some learning to do. What is scrupulosity? A psychological disorder primarily characterized by pathological guilt or obsession associated with moral or religious issues that is often accompanied by compulsive moral or religious observance and is highly distressing and maladaptive. You might think that's just a diagnosis on what Lydia was experiencing, but really it was a diagnosis on me. My scrupulous behaviors created a scrupulous environment, which created a scrupulous child. Does that make sense? How does this happen? You start to ask, okay, so how much of this is nature? There's a lot of mental illness in the Stauffer family and Johnson family. There's a lot of mental illness in the Ernstrom and Robinette family. So she's getting it from both barrels, genetically. So how much of it is nature? And if it's nature, then you learn what is outside your control and you have to find a way to accept it. And that's scary. If it's nurture, you want to learn what is within your control and seek to correct what needs correction. And when you have it as bad as we did, you have to look really deep, and you can't just assume, we're doing it right. Come on, we had the best intentions. Obviously, we're doing it right. We had to be very honest about it. So, what is a culture of orthodoxy? Well, you know what culture is, and you know that in Cache Valley, there is an orthodoxy culture. If you have a large percentage of Latter-day Saints living in a geographical area who are trying to observe certain standards and commandments, culturally, and I'm not saying that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is necessarily doing this, but we as a people develop a culture while we're trying to live certain ways. And that culture then has implications. So, and that is orthodoxy. If it's generally accepted, it doesn't necessarily mean that it reflects the intended teachings or values of the actual doctrine. If it's culture, it can spring from a collection of misinterpretations and become something it was never intended to be. Now, if you sit there and go, okay, he's clearly trying to defend the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm not necessarily trying to do that. What I want you to see is that if you look into those teachings, you'll actually find hope. Hope that's really needed. And if we're not teaching that, we're making mistakes. So, I want you to think of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. That's orthodoxy that's taken it to something it was never intended to be. You need to just take a picture of that, sorry. Okay, and then I don't have time for this, but I'll be really quick. So, there's kind of this parenting theory, like when they're young, we point and label, hey, Sam, that's wrong, don't do that. And we might think we've taught him really well, but he's just learned to judge people who smoke or drink coffee, right? So that's not great. We've taught them to be judgmental, even though we think we're being really good intentionally as parents. Then they get a little bit older and we say, hey, choose wise friends. Of course you want them to choose wise friends. But when you pair that with the judgmental behavior that they've adopted, now they start to segregate socially. They start judging and segregating. And that causes a lot of problems. I don't have time to tell you the story. It's a great story. So if you want to go back and watch last year's, I told it last year. But it's a great picture too, great styles, Tyson. And then when they get even older, then we want them to be really bold because we know they're going to be tempted a lot. So we tell them, walk out of that party, stand up, be the one to call it out. And what we don't realize is we might be turning them into preachy people, right? So be bold. And what we don't realize is that can create more problems. So judgmental, segregational, preachy, bigoted, right? So culture of orthodoxy. And then we try to say, oh, by the way, make sure you're kind. Do you see how difficult that is and what a problem that is? How can he do that? How can he even be a good influence if he's only around good people because he's separated himself from all the bad people, right? Elder Remlin cautioned us against that. So let's sum it up. Point label, choose your friends wisely, be bold, but be kind. No parent parents to turn their children into judgmental, segregating, preachy hypocrites, especially in the name of their faith. But there's also milk before meat. Of course, parents don't want to put their children in the path of risk just to make sure that they're kind. So how do you do that? How do you provide protection, education, and skill sets for our children without turning them into zealous bigots? It's not easy. So perhaps we might be parenting with such intensity because we might be scrupulous about our responsibility as parents. Have you ever thought about that? We only feel responsibility associated with the choices of others when we feel we have neglected the stewardships to which we've been entrusted. I hope that makes sense. So, in Latter-day Saint teachings, we're taught you have to teach your children with all diligence. But what we've turned that into is if your child does not live in all diligence, you have failed as parents. So here are the thinking errors. Teaching in our stewardship with all diligence does not mean the following. Those we teach don't have agency. They do. If they use their agency poorly, it indicates our failure to fulfill our stewardship. Not true. We should teach at any cost. That's not true. Any effort is good effort. We've made a lot of efforts, and a lot of them have been really bad. It also doesn't mean that the good choices of those within our stewardship are an indication that we were excellent stewards. So you have to remember, correlation does not equal causation in parenting. Because if that were true, let's take a very macro look at this. If that's true, then are we suggesting that the sins we commit as God's children are upon the heads of our heavenly parents? And if that's true, if our choices are indicative of the diligence level of our parents, where would we rank our heavenly parents? So, and this I think is the most devastating thing about this culture of orthodoxy of all, is it actually can lead to teaching away from Jesus Christ's power. And here's why. What did he really accomplish? The dangerous notion is, and I hear this all the time, be careful when you teach about Christ's grace or his power, because you might entitle people to think that it's okay to sin. I want you to think about that for just a second. If someone really understands Christ's grace, would they want to spit upon that atonement? Would they just go out and be like, I'm going to show him? I just don't think, maybe there's Dahmers in the world or something that would do it that way. I just don't see it. If you really understand it, that's not the result. And that's not what he teaches. So it begs the question, do we teach the grace of Christ even though we may risk that some may mistakenly feel entitled to sin for now? Hopefully not if we're teaching it well. Or do we fall short in our teaching of the full capacity of Christ's power to heal and provide hope? Because Those who truly understand the grace of Christ wouldn't want to defraud it. And when his love for us is truly understood, we aren't spoiled, we're inspired. And we are inspired to love him back, as is taught in 1 John 4:19. We love him because we first discovered the love he has for us. So, you see, it isn't the gospel of Jesus Christ that nurtures scrupulosity. It's our failure to correctly understand it and teach it. The gospel of Christ itself was designed to heal and rescue us from it. Now you might think, why is he going over this when it's clearly the type of teaching that caused this mental anxiety and scrupulosity in our child? Well, I want you to see that it was the thinking errors about how we were as parents and how we approached our religious beliefs as parents that led to that. Whereas if we would have correctly understood it, we would not have been so worried and so uptight and so intense. And that intensity increased when we didn't understand how bad it was. So, best advice I've ever received. I shared this last year, but this comes from my mother. You tell that child you're fully confident in their ability to reason and make good choices. And then simultaneously you tell that child you are fully confident in the Savior's ability to heal them when they don't. We have a tendency to think in binary, and we have to realize it's not that way. Both are important. That's my mom. So, oh yeah, you want a picture of that. We're going to get to the Q&A, but I want you to think about so here's Lydia, she's alive, she's right here. She's doing quite well. So what led to this? Why all this information about scrupulosity and parenting and what we always get asked this, what do you attribute her improvement to? And we would say we cannot pinpoint one thing. It's everything. And I've tried to capture a little snapshot of what everything looks like. And it's all of these things. And so as we turn this over to a question and answer, we want you to look at this and here, you've heard our story a little bit. We'll go into more detail as you ask questions. But hopefully you can see that there are so many resources available and all of them were crucial to Lydia being healthy today. So what we're going to do is we have these two little small kind of lapel mics and they'll be like a roaming mic. So if you want to ask a question, that's awesome. Just raise your hand and we'll have someone bring it around and then speak clearly into the mic and try to keep your question brief if you can. And then we can get to lots of questions, if that's okay. Sound good? Okay. It's those little things that are free.
It's cool.
Things are cold. I'm awake. It's good.
There are multiple children in your family, so how did this affect the other siblings?
How did this impact the siblings? Well, Liz, they came at you with that. Do you want to tell them about it?
Yeah, so my oldest sister right there, she was on the mission when this happened, and it really affected her as well. They actually were willing to make accommodations for her, and she was able to contact me when it wasn't her P day. I remember it was one of the worst days I was having. I probably hadn't left my bed in 2 days, and then I had that video call from her, and I could tell that it was affecting her. She was one of the reasons I wanted to keep trying. And she almost came home too. And I'm very glad that she stuck it out because obviously she wouldn't have met her husband, but it made it worth the work that we both put in. And my older brother, it was my freshman year of high school and he was a senior and he was on student council. He had all these friends and he's always, going to football games and leading. And he was willing to bring the little freshman with him. And even though it was something that was painful behind the scenes, he was willing to try and have fun with me, and I'm grateful for that. And my little brother, he is struggling with some anxiety, and not as severe, but he's dealing with some mental health issues right now. And I think with the younger siblings, it's scary because we don't want that to happen to him too. It's definitely just something that affected us all, and it's an experience we've gained. I can share some as the mom, checking in with the kids. I found this out after she got home, but Jenny had shared that, she got to a point in her mission where she told her mission president, I don't really want to call because my parents just cry their eyes out and like trauma dump on me. And it broke my heart, but it's true because she calls, hey, how's everything going? And it's like, we're falling apart. There was nothing to fake for her. And she, as the typical oldest child, felt like, well, I should just come home from my mission because I can fix it. I'll take care of everything. And her brother, do you mind if I share what he shared in therapy when we were together? He hadn't been to a therapy session with Lydia and both of us. And so Eric and I were used to Lydia coming at us. She would just like blast us and let us have it. And we kind of got used to it, and we just knew we could be a safe place for her. And she had a lot of feelings she needed to get out on us. And so she kind of came at us during a therapy session, and her brother said, I don't know how this is supposed to work, but I can't believe you're talking to mom and dad like this. And she went on to say something, and she mentioned something about struggling and feeling alone. And he said, you feel alone? You feel sad? And he said, I just have done my senior year alone with, he's in charge of the powder puff gang, all those things. His homecoming date had to send us pictures. My brother had to get a corsage because we were checking her into the hospital for homecoming. And he said, I just spent a year watching mom and dad put all of their emotion, all of their time, all of their resources into you. And you're going to sit here and talk to them like that, And so I know he had to work through some things like that. And Sam, we tried to protect him as much as we could. He was in 6th grade elementary school, and it was all such a whirlwind when we checked her into the hospital for the first time. He got off the bus to Aunt Amy, sitting on our front porch, just because she's going to stay with him now. And he's like, where is mom and dad? Where's Lydia? And we didn't want to share scary details that he didn't need to hear. But we just told him, Lydia is sick. Her brain is very sick, and she needs to go to where sick people go to the hospital so she can be safe. And so even now, if, we don't really have too many bad days at our house now, but there's a bad day, he'll say something's happening. Are we going back to how it was? He told me, I can't live in a house if we go back. I can't live in our house if it goes back to how it was. It was pretty bad for a while. So it does affect the siblings, but when it's life and death, you just pour all your energy into the one that needs you the most. Anyway.
And we knew it would impact, and we wish we could have been better at doing that. But there were days that I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't move. You just curl up in a ball, cry. And so you hope that Emily can carry the load. And then that she's feeling that way, so you have to do it. And it's a juggling match, and it is so hard. It's really hard. Thank you for that question. Go ahead. Thank you.
Is to share your story. It's a hard story to share. Vulnerability is so important. My question is, as an educator, are you still in the church education system? Okay,
Yeah, I'm not supposed to answer that because of conflict of interest, but yeah.
whatever then.
Yeah.
Because this is a cultural thing, and I've seen it in my own family, my own daughter, who's still, she's 23 and still struggling. How do we change the culture within, specifically the LDS church, the Catholic church still do it, other denominations still do it? How do we change that culture when it's just lay people teaching our children?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel very, experience is a great education, right? And so I cannot separate my experience from my professional pursuits. So it's how I got involved with Paz Wellness, to be honest with you, is because of this. So when I'm teaching the classes that I teach now there, it's all in there. So it changed completely the way that I teach. It has a lot to do with the way I see the Savior and his atonement, because now I see people differently. I think we shared last hour that Lydia and I were sitting in the Home Depot parking lot one time, and we saw this girl, and she was all emoed out, right? Really dark, lots of eyeliner, really, the way the clothes are and everything. And in my earlier years of my career, I've been very judgmental, been like, that girl needs a swift kick to the bum or something like that, And I was sitting there, and it was instinctual. I just saw her, and I just said to Lydia, you know what that girl needs? She just needs a hug. She needs to be loved. And all people see is rebellion. And it's not. It's all pain. She just has pain, and she doesn't know what to do with it. And so, yeah, it has absolutely influenced that. And I've asked myself that so often, like, okay, so how much can one person really do? Well, I love something that Dieter F. Uchtdorf said. He said, stand where you are and lift where you stand. So you can only influence whatever opportunities you have to influence. So if you learn a better way, if you learn a higher way, if you learn a way that's going to bring more hope and more love into this world, then do it. Even if it's one person or teaching hundreds of people and hoping it's one person. That is really all we can do. Because as you change one, then you can change generations. Yeah. Reed, there's another one that's going to be up here too. Go ahead.
I was here last year.
Yeah, I remember you from last year, yeah.
I just wanted to let you know, because of your story, you have helped me throughout this last year to be able to not be judgmental and to open. And so I was really excited to come back this year and see you again and to let you know that your story is making a difference. And it's made a difference in my life and to the people that I share it with. And so I just want you to know that the pain that you've gone through is also bringing joy to so many other people because you have done it. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for that, Dick.
So I wanted to also express appreciation for all three of you, but specifically you, Lydia. I mean, it's amazing just hearing a little bit of your story in such a short period of time to be going from such a dark place to be presenting in front of people. And so as your story was being shared, what was going on in my mind is I was wondering where you're at today, listening to that and given, where you come. And again, just thank you for just the gift of sharing.
Thank you so much. It is like the best way to put it is night and day, like from even a year and a half ago to 3 years ago. I go about my day differently. I used to be so pessimistic, and today I just look back on it with love and gratitude, even though it's something that's hard to think about sometimes. I'm so grateful that I went through this and I gained an experience out of this, and that's why I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to share this, because I know how painful it was, and I cannot imagine someone else. And there are thousands and thousands of people going through it. So if it's the least I can do, if it's one person, it's really worth sharing all the terrible details. And today it's just something that I carry on my sleeve, you know, and I'm thriving. I have a job, I go to school, you know, I just live day to day, but I do feel happy, and I do have the resources that I need for when I am having a hard time. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. And you definitely can see that in your comments.
Oh, yeah.
You're in a different place.
Thank you.
A follow-up to that question, does thriving and night and day mean cure? Is a diagnosis with a couple commas, are those curable, or is it an ongoing treatment and application of the list of things that we see on this slide right there?
That is a good question. I'll also let you guys share. I don't see it as cured. I see it as I learned to live with it, and there was medication and so much work with a psychiatrist and therapy and working on my relationship with my parents. And I deal with a lot of anxiety, just school and stress. Every morning I feel like I'm gonna barf and I just want to stay in bed, but it's something that I can face. And at the end of each day, it's like, I did it, and I can keep going, and I have so much more compassion for myself and for others, because it's something that is with me, but I've learned to deal with. I hope that answers. You guys have anything to say?
I'd say, I will say, sometimes she does throw up, and she'll text me from school, well, just threw up. Just thought I'd let you know, where, and as her mom, I've noticed, something that would have truly, literally laid her out on the couch for a week, she'll just take 5 minutes and be like, okay, I'm gonna go lay in my bed for a minute. Okay, we talk in our house about be a tennis ball, not an egg, and splat. She is better with her tennis ball skills. She bounces back. So, and we still, deal with things. She stays on top of medication, and we check in every year with the psychiatrist, or every 6 months with the psychiatrist, just so she can make sure. Yeah.
I think a lot of the different modalities that have helped are still being used, and we talk about them often. And I think it could get bad. I think we would be foolish to assume this will never happen again, because then you get too comfortable, and then you're not being aware and assertive and active as parents and in her own healing. So, and she's a typical teenage girl now too, so she's really playing into that really well. And but I would say that therapy is not out of the picture for the future. I mean, I think there's lots of work still to be done for me, for Emily, for Lydia, her siblings. There's a lot of work to be done. I think that's what we need to change. We need to change that stigma and realize if we're checking in with a dentist every 6 months and a family doctor every once in a while, why aren't we doing that with our brains on a regular basis, especially with relationships?
I was going to point out one thing. So she went weekly to therapy for at least a year, and occasionally, when invited, we would pop in as her parents. But when she started feeling stable, then I started taking the off week, and Eric would come with me, and then it got to where it was us going every week, because there was a lot to heal from, but also you just have to realize no matter how pure and good your intentions are or were, this is a family problem. This is not a Lydia problem. And we needed to completely change the way we parented and did things. Yeah.
Just one thought on that. We didn't share these details, but just for the Latter-day Saint perspective, right? I was serving as bishop. Lydia went completely inactive. She was atheist, agnostic throughout much of this. And we had to let go and just be like, hey, all we care about is that you're alive, right? And you can't fake that. You have to really believe and feel that way. Because really, when it comes down to life and death, you want them to know that they're safe. And so we were doing that. And I was released as bishop early. I was in for, I think, 3 years. So a typical one could be 5 years. They're saying that that's not true anymore, but, So anyway, we had to face a lot of cultural change and how Stauffers would be perceived. And we had to let go of that. And it's actually embarrassing that we had it in the first place, right? I just wish we weren't like that. I wish we didn't care what people thought. I wish that we were autonomous in our own beliefs and confident in the way we wanted to live our own lives and trusting of a God who loves us. And we've had to adjust that. I believe this with all of my heart. If Lydia's recovery did not result in her coming back to the gospel of Jesus Christ, I'm okay with that. And the reason why I'm okay with that, not because I don't think that that would really bless her, but because I believe that the Lord would understand why she came to that place. And what he would be able to track in everything there. He's not seeing this rebellious child who wants to just be angry and sinful and all that, but he would see a sick child who is coping and learning how to deal with her brain. And I think that the Savior has that kind of compassion. I hope that I said that as carefully as I could. And I think hopefully you know my heart and why I said that. How are we doing on time? Okay, we're good. Other questions? And there, and one here to read right up here.
Thank you. It's good to have you guys here. I have a couple kids. Your oldest kids is age. Our kids know each other. I don't know if we know each other yet, but for my younger kids, I feel like I've fallen into a lot of the same things that you've fallen into culturally, with how we talk to our kids about the gospel. And I'm aware of it and trying to change that. It's been an ongoing thing for a while now, for many years. What's your best advice for how you parent now? Raising your children in the latter days.
Well, if you knew how many times I've looked at him and said, what am I doing wrong? Because that's what we do. It must be my fault. It must be our fault but I shared this earlier. A good friend of ours, Scott Wyatt, said once, it's good to have some healthy ambivalence for your children. And that feels so counterintuitive, but I guess I just had to examine my own faith and worry about myself and go to the worst scenario, what I thought were the worst case scenarios before and what they are now. And does that make sense what I'm saying? Yeah. And sorry, I keep losing my train of thought.
Healthy ambivalence.
Healthy ambivalence, that's right. And just allow her to choose what she's going to choose. Because our Heavenly Father is all about agency. I know I have taught. I know I can teach by example. But I have to give her space to choose for herself. Because it's like, you don't want your kids to go to church because mom and dad told them to, but because they want to, because of a relationship with the Savior. That's why it means so much more now that she goes, because she's found her Savior and has a relationship with him. And anyway, I'm rambling now, but yeah, go ahead.
Speak to that. Russell and Nilsson has taught, and Elder Renlund has taught, that God doesn't want us to return to him. He wants us to choose to return to him. So the difference is the element of agency. So oftentimes when we're pursuing our stewardships of teaching, we think if we teach the best way possible, we will make it so that they'll return to him. Remember, that was the adversary's idea. Agency is the plan, with provision of the Savior's atonement. And the other thing that I love that President Nielsen has taught is when he taught, he told this story of his daughter, and she asked him, "Dad, do you own me?" And then he turned the advice to us, and he said, "We don't own our children. Our job is to love them, to lead them, and to let them go." And I know I can love my kids, and I feel like I can lead them. It's the letting go that is so hard to do. Let them go. Is that not exactly, remember the picture I showed of, God, and what are we saying about our heavenly parents? Well, what have they done? They loved us, they led us, and they let us go. Look, we're all just here without them. They're crazy. Are they careless? Are they neglectful? No, they're not. Let them go. That is the plan.
I just thought of something practical, use for right now with kids is she, for a long time, didn't want to join us for anything spiritual. If we were going to bless the food, she walked out of the room. We would secretly do "come follow me," like where she couldn't hear, But now it's just an invitation. Anyone that wants to have family prayer with us, you're invited. So our little guy, Sam, is kind of going through some things right now. So I tuck him in at night. I said, "Do you want to say prayers?" And I say, "Yeah, well, in my head," or "you say it," and it's just not, no, in our house, we do that. It's just, we invite them. And if Sam's feeling anxious and he needs to take a few weeks or a month off of passing the sacrament, okay, it's fine. Where before it would be like, this is your duty, you need, come on, There are plenty of men in the congregation that can step in if Sam needs to take a break.
And even as we say that to a public group, anxiety comes in. Because you sit there and you go, you're going to think we're neglectful parents. You're going to think that we are not taking care of what we're supposed to take care of. It's so counterintuitive to what you just feel inside as a parent. Yeah. So, and I think there's a question right here.
So I was 23 when my dad took his life. And so after that, I've been super sensitive to anyone who looks down or crying or depressed, my children, my grandchildren, like clinging to their side for a day, so because I can fix it. What did your parents do instinctively? I mean, even though they were schooled as to what to do, what do you think, what did they do right? What did they do instinctively that kept you from completing that in the beginning?
The short answer is simply just love, and they would be by my side while also giving me the space that I need. And they would sleep next to me, and they would, they were always in the room with me, and they would give me plenty of space when I needed it. But they let me express what I needed to express while still making sure that I knew that I was loved. And that's what really helped me. And there were a lot of things that would frustrate me where they would parent, but that's definitely something that I'm grateful for that they did.
It morphed over time. At first, there was one of us with eyes on her all the time. And when she had said she had made a plan that she was gonna take her life while we all slept, well, there goes sleeping now. And so we would take turns doing that, and one of us, it was usually me, would stay home from church with her because we didn't feel like she could be home alone and be safe. And, and sometimes he would, Bishop wouldn't go to church. He'd stay home with his daughter Anyway, I remember going to therapy one day and I was crying, and I said, she wasn't there. I said, I feel like if I continue to care at this level, I'm gonna die. Like, I feel like my heart's gonna give out. And I said, we walk around on eggshells and we have our eyes on her all the time. And he said, hey, stop it. And I said, well, how do you stop that? And he said, she is looking to you, whether she realizes it or not. She's looking to her parents to be the steady, calm rock in her life. And if she sees mom and dad flipping out, then she'll go, well, then who's the steady people in my life? And so he said, if she's on a roller coaster, get off the roller coaster. Do not ride it with her. Let her know I'm standing here. I see you on the roller coaster. And when you're ready to get off, I'm right here and I'm steady. And then the last great advice he gave us was stop trying to talk her off a cliff. Just sit with her on the cliff. And that was so clear to me. That made total sense to me because we tried to like, it's okay. Oh. We just would sit by her, just be there by her and not have to say the right thing.
We're out of time, but just in closing, that concept that she's talking about is differentiation. And if I could invite any of you to look into a psychological concept that is going to be healthy for your relationships, your children, grandchildren, siblings, everyone, it is to learn how to differentiate. And there's lots of great books that can teach you on it. Back to that question that you asked, though, I think it really does boil down to this. So as parents, do we believe in this principle? Do we believe that if we can help them discover love first, that the response will be love in return? Not to manipulate it, not to force it, but it will be chosen. And then we'll close with this picture that Lydia drew when she was going through it. So thank you so much for your time. We appreciate all your questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Stauffer family, and I'm going to give that to Emily. We really, truly encourage you to take what do you call it, of the
QR code.
Yeah.
Survey.
Survey that QR code. It's very, very helpful as we plan our future. Thank you so much, Eric and Emily and Lydia, and all of you for your wonderful questions.